Excellent. All right. Good morning, everybody. We're on day two of the Marathon Mindset Summit. We're jumping right in.
Why don't we
Okay.
start with where we left off, which was our workbook? Does everybody have the workbook? If not, I can put it in the chat unless somebody beats me
Amazing.
to
Thank
it.
you.
Unless somebody's
Pop it
faster
in the
than
chat
me.
if you looked at the workbook yesterday. Allison just dropped it in the chat. Give us a thumbs up if you liked the workbook content from yesterday, and we're going to continue with that today because we really want to. Great, Carissa's given us a thumbs up. Sydney's working through it. Janet's working through it. So this is a workbook that is designed to guide you in your specific business. Sally's given us a thumbs up. So we are going to all come up with a different answer today,
Hmm.
but that is the key because everyone's business is unique. So, because your business is unique, you're going to have a unique answer. And so, this is something that's not a one size fits all. It's not a let's everybody do the same thing because we know you're all in different places in your business. And so, this is actually going to help you figure out what your mile one is, and I know Allison's going to kind of take a couple of these questions from yesterday and we're going to just kind of go through them quickly. And then we'll get into the design demo and we'll move through the last part of the workbook together after the design demo.
Perfect. So this is the workbook in case you haven't opened it. You don't have to open it, but as you can see, people are enjoying it, so I highly suggest it. The questions that we ended with, what surprised you the most yesterday? So you're welcome to share something in the chat if you want to. And also, I know some people like to keep things close to the vest. But what were some things that surprised you? Was there one thing that stood out? Again, I want to remember the focus of what we're doing here is not to give you a big list that you don't take action on. We want you to identify one mile marker, one thing, because then you can pick the next thing after that. But a big long list is not what we're here to do. Okay. So, what surprised you the most yesterday? Again, feel free to share in the chat.
You're
Was there
amongst
something that
friends.
made you uncomfortable,
Mm.
right? Like, oh, yeah, I'm doing that. Or, oh, I thought I had that figured out, but I actually am struggling with that, right? And then if I had to guess right now, do you know what your biggest bottleneck is? So we're going to dive into that today after we get some design time with LuAnn. But if you had to guess, if you had to assess, is it your mindset that needs to be the first thing you're focusing on? Is it your systems? Do you know there's something you're like, ah, this thing is driving me nuts and I could fix it if I only spent one day figuring this out? Is it your numbers? Like LuAnn was saying yesterday, everything can't be like we're reinventing the wheel every event, right? So, how do you know that you're profitable? How do you know that you're not overbuying? Whether you use EveryStem, whether you use Flower Math, whether you use a combination, whether you use your own spreadsheet, the bottom line is how do you make sure you're tracking that? Because that's what the numbers piece is about, focusing on your profit. And if it's all of the above, that's okay. But again, we want you to pick one thing at the end of this summit, at the end of these 2 days, that's going to be your thing. Okay. So I don't want you to get bogged down in like, let me tell you the 50 things, right, that aren't going well. We really want to focus on just what's happening now. Um, yeah. Tiffany says, I've been thinking about adding photos to my proposal, but made me feel like I don't need to do it. Yeah, that is something that, as Jeri said in her answer, it's part of systems and it's part of your process. Um, and I do think photos can sell our work, but we also need to protect our time, which is part of your mindset, right? These things are interwoven, right? So it's not like, oh, I track my profit and that has nothing to do with mindset, right? And we know this. But this is where it's about self accountability and self
Mhm.
recognition because it's very easy to just take for granted, well, we do this the way we've done it and it's been working until it's not. Or, I'm just going to keep cruising with the same shortcuts I've been using. Um, let's see. Definitely systems, Janine says. Awesome. Yeah, I think whether it's something, when it's pricing, it's kind of obvious. It's great. And it's easy to fix. That's the beauty. Mindset, a little harder, takes that accountability day after day. But when it comes to things that are a little easier to fix, like numbers, you can focus on that. Um, the reason, again, that LuAnn made this workbook is so that you can actually put these things in writing, think about them, and make a plan. Okay. So this exists for a reason. And we'll get back to the rest of the workbook in a few. For anybody who is trying to keep up, we will be on page 13 of the workbook when we do come back in here. Okay. And I will
Perfect.
stop sharing and hand it back to you, one of you.
All right. Well, I think if everybody's ready, we'll do our design demo. We're going to talk about design from the perspective of sprint mindset versus marathon mindset, sprint business owner versus marathon business owner. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I want you all to just think about how you do certain things in your business that relate to design, because obviously mindset and all of these kinds of systems, mindset and design and pricing, it all connects. We're talking about, is systems your issue? Is design your issue? But really, they all do connect together. And so you might say, okay, my mindset obviously has to travel through everything I do, right? If I have an issue with mindset, it's going to kind of connect through to all the other elements of my business. Let me go ahead and put this in the presenter mode. But um, when we think about design, it really is kind of the final element of what we need to do as our process goes through. Design is not the first thing we do. We need to learn how to design. As Alison said, we need skills to be a good designer. We need the basic fundamentals of design, like proportion and scale and all of those things, balance and color. But when we go through the process, when we see a client inquiry come in, design isn't the first step, right? We're out there marketing ourselves, then we're going through our, process of inquiry, then we're going through our proposal process, then we're going through our pricing and sourcing and supply process, and then we're prepping for the design, and then the design is actually the final step. And so typically as a sprint designer, we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. We're getting so excited about the flowers that we're kind of putting that first and we're putting all the other things secondarily. And as artistic people and as creative people, we tend to do that and we get a little bit too excited. And so when I first started, I bought a flower shop that was already in business in 2006. It's called Verbena Floral Design. It is still there in Central Austin today. I sold it a few years ago, and the owner that owns it now is running it well. And when I first started out, I really spent so much time trying to become a good designer that I forgot that I needed to do good mechanics, that I needed to put the supplies into my design pricing, that I need to do all these things because I was so excited and I was working from a sprint mentality instead of a marathon mentality. And after several weddings where I underpriced my designs because I left out the container or I left out a big piece of mechanics because I was so excited about thinking about the flowers that I didn't think about the pieces that really built the foundation of the design, I learned a lesson and I promised myself a few things that I'm going to share with you today. So this is the design that supports the marathon. And this design today that I'm going to do, I did two videos for you. The first video is the mechanics and the base layers. The second video is the mid layers, kind of creating your signature style. And then we're going to go live at the end and we're going to kind of do the final customization, which is going to be the top layer. So I didn't want to spend 3 hours trying to make a big design with you guys and take up too much of your time. So the first two parts are going to be videos. And then the final part, I'm going to go into another part of the studio here, and I'm going to go ahead and do the design live. If you have questions, pop them in the chat, and Allison and Jeri can help me answer them as we go and at the end. So this is the mood board. And this is based on a wedding that I did at a place called the Arlo in Austin, Texas. And it's a very beautiful, kind of intimate ceremony space with a big window. It's very naturally architectural, modern, white walls. And this client wanted something very spring forward, these kind of softer pastel colors. She came to me with the picture up in the top right-hand corner and the picture in the center. And then I worked with the floral source, Kelly, to curate a color palette and a design of all American grown flowers. So if you haven't ordered anything from Kelly at the floral source, I highly recommend. And so the flowers on the left-hand side are some of the ones that we're going to be using in this design. But I want to tell you a quick story. When I first bought my flower shop, the first time one of my employees left and I had to hire someone new, it was a person who was extremely motivated and a really hard worker, but she wasn't the most artistic designer. She learned by watching the other designers that she had worked with at her previous job. And she was a hard worker and she had great ethics and she had great customer service skills. And so I hired her. And I worked with her on her design. And the first time I sat down and talked to her about designing, I said, "What do you envision for this design that you're about to make for this client?" And she looked at me and she said, "It's done, they love it, and I still have a job." That's what she said to me. It's done, they love it, and I still have a job. And I will never forget that, because instead of thinking about really a vision or a plan or defining the purpose, the style, the color of the design, she really thought about how do I get this done in a really practical way? My only goal is that the client likes it and I don't get fired. So many of us are on the other end of this. We're artists. We want something that's fabulous. And even if the client is happy, sometimes we're still not happy, right? If I had only had another 20 minutes to finish that arch, I would have added so many other things. Or if I had only had this to put into this design and I would have made it so much better. The client doesn't know that. The client is still happy. So finding that balance between being overwhelmed by unlimited choice and being just strictly, focused on the client likes it and I still have a job is what we're trying to kind of find as a marathon designer today. So here is my first video. We're doing the mechanics here. I created a chicken wire base for my two arrangements. And instead of making a ball of chicken wire, I like to create like a nautilus. So I take the log and I roll it up. In the third vase, I have agarwool. And so I'm adding my recipe based on my base flowers and my greenery. And so after the mechanics, the first two things I want to do is put in my base layers. I want to start by pulling from my recipe. I showed you that little paper in the video. And spring designers let their team have free-for-all access to the cooler. But marathon designers protect what they need for every design by planning it out. And so I think that's a really important thing, because when you have mechanics first and you're building from a recipe, you're able to have creativity in the moment, because creativity actually thrives under constraint. And so many of us think about building a design and we don't even know where to begin because we have this big swath of flowers laying in front of us. But if we have a structure and a process and a system for our design, we can actually really create something that is going to make more of an impact with fewer flowers. So when I went through this, it reminded me of one of my friends, Melanie. She had a job at a flower shop where there were basically, she called it the old days, no recipes, no limits, no profit. And then she went to a job where she started using EveryStem. And she felt like the recipes were helping her, but she was still getting the feel of it. She was still figuring it out. How do I make this work for myself? And after a full season and a half, she had the opportunity to do a big open house recently. And we had a big storm in Austin, and the open house was canceled because the weather was icy and no one can drive in Texas when there's ice. And so she sent me a message and she said, we scrapped that plan for the open house, and I had unlimited product to work with because they had gotten the flowers in for the open house before it was canceled. She said the designs that she made from those flowers took her forever, and that it turns out doing all the recipe legwork ahead of time makes design so much more effortless and fun the week of the event. And so creating mechanics first mindset is something that I told myself very early on. You have to put in your containers, your supplies, and your mechanics first. And then you can work on building something that's going to be structure before flowers. So you guys probably have read what's at the bottom there. Sprint designers grab the prettiest stems first and figure out the container later. This is how you end up halfway through realizing your vase is too small. So we really want to have this process thought out as a marathon designer of what is the perspective? Where is this design going? What is the purpose of this design? And then working into those next few layers of mechanics and base layers. And when you do this, you basically create a signature style. And that's what we're going to talk about on the next video in the next slide. But when I had my flower shop, I had so many people who would walk into the store and they would say, LuAnn, I went to a party last week and I saw your flowers. And the minute I walked in, I knew that was a verbena arrangement. I knew verbena had done the wedding flowers. I knew verbena had done the flowers for that party. They knew because I have a European garden style. And I can adjust that a little bit here and there. And I can, make things a little bit different for my clients. But because I use my core flower types and I have a signature style, I can create something very, very unique to me that my clients recognize. And if you look at some of the most well-known designers, you can say, without a doubt, that's a Passion Flower Sue design. That's a, so-and-so design. And so sometimes people feel like doing everything different for everyone and customizing everything is actually a superpower. But really, defining your style and creating that signature style is what's going to get you to become more of a marathon designer. So let's take a look at the next video. Now here in this video, we're going to talk about the middle layers and building your signature style. I created a rough framework. I used a garden stake and I cut it into two pieces for the tallest pieces of the jasmine and to give that some real dimension and depth. And then I came in with my stock and my snapdragons, my line flowers. So my kale is a base flower. I would use a hydrangea or sedum or kale. My stock and my snapdragons are my kind of go-to line flowers. They're creating the shape. They're really building something that kind of gives this design that European garden style that I really love to work in. And as I'm working, you can see that I'm making 3 different designs, but I'm working with one ingredient at a time across all 3 arrangements. I am not doing one and then doing the other one and then doing the next one, because this is going to be a cohesive design for a ceremony, and then it's going to be able to be moved to a cake table. So I really use my recipe and I follow what I've built. But if I have 10 stock landed out in my recipe for the low lush arrangement in the front, and then I have 5 for each of the other 2 arrangements, if I feel like the one in the front is full enough with 8, I could take 2 of those and put them in the tall arrangement if I want to. But because I have figured that recipe out ahead of time, I don't have to say, oh, wait, do I have, can I do 20? Do I have enough? Do I need to save some for something else? I know that I can work with 20 stems across these three containers and I can adjust it if I need to. And if I was unsure about do I have enough, what I would do is I would hold back a few of each stems, hold back a few of the snapdragons, hold back a few of the stock, and I would actually then add them to the design that I felt like needed it the most. Because it's based on a recipe, I know that I'm within my budget. Once I order the flowers and they're here in my studio, I do not need to worry about going and buying more. I am not going to panic buy and go and buy more. So building the signature style through the core flowers, through knowing which kind of flower types I love to work with, my base flowers, my line flowers, and my greenery, I can then build something on top of that that's going to give my client some customization. So I want to tell you a little story about Katie in Colorado. She is an EveryStem member. And she said this about working with a marathon mindset and building recipes in her designs. She said, I've been active in the floral industry in Denver for many years, but I've never used a software program before. Now that I use EveryStem, I have freelancers come in all the time who consistently are impressed that my orders are spot on. They always look at the product and say, I don't think we'll have enough. And then we have the perfect amount every time. They are all so used to people over ordering, but I love the control we have. So it is not a constraint to build recipes and think through your plan. If you don't want to build a stem by stem recipe, you can build it by the bunch. You can build one big recipe for the entire wedding if that's what you want to do. You find what works for you, but you do need to plan ahead and go through a process that works for you. You don't have to use my exact process that I'm sharing here, but I think building a process that works for you, sharing it with your team so that they are aware of the process and that they can do this work if you are sick, if you are injured, if you are not available. It's not all in your brain. It's written down. It's communicated with your team. Because if you are a floral designer doing weddings, you need to be able to fulfill your client's needs, whether you're there or not. If anybody has any questions about this, kind of the building the signature style and going through the middle layers of the design, let me know. Also, one thing I want to say about this is before I started doing these designs, I pulled all my extras aside. When I processed the flowers, I can look at my EveryStem list and I can see how many extras of each variety of flower I have. And I've pulled those aside. So when we go do the live, you'll see that bucket of extras. So I do have those to work with as well. So if I am a little bit feeling like I have a hole, under the front of the Queen Anne's or whatever, I can fill that in. I don't have to worry about it because I do have some extras. And then the last piece is going to be strategic customization. And so we're going to go live and I'm going to kind of walk over to the area where I have these set up and we are going to switch from sharing over to going live. So I'm just going to unspotlight myself real quick and I'll walk over. Okay. And if you guys have questions, Allison and Jeri could answer them. I'm going to walk over
Yeah,
right now.
LuAnn, there is a question from Mary. Hey, Marianne. If you mainly work with seasonal flowers, can your 5 flower types be similar blooms that switch out depending on the season? For example, ranunculus, lisianthus, or peony and dahlia. Does that make sense? So both Jeri and I jumped in with, yes, it does. So this is a great way, and actually also kind of leads into answering a question that was asked yesterday in an email, which is, let's say you're a flower farmer, you're a grower, like Marianne is here, or like Bo, who asked the question, how do you have placeholders, right? Or make these substitutions if you're growing the flowers? And, the truth is, whether you use EveryStem or Flower Math, or you do this on a piece of paper somewhere, The truth is, you want to always be accounting for the cost of the stem and be adaptable on what type of stem it is. So this is like whether you're growing and you don't know if your peonies will be in bloom at this time or not, or whether you're buying peonies and you still don't know if they will be in bloom or not. You have to have a little, we were calling it a buffer yesterday, but what it is just an actual plan of how you're going to break down your recipe. So I can put in my recipe that I'm going to have peonies, for example, and ranunculus. But if I need to sub them for lisianthus and dahlias, that's okay, right? Depending on the season. The most important thing is that the profit is going to be consistent because what you're paying or what your inputs are for that flower, what you retail it for is comparable. So what we don't want to do is substitute like I'll just use the lisianthus and the ranunculus as an example, right? Like the lisianthus is maybe more expensive than the ranunculus or the dahlia, right? It's going to depend on what you grow and how much you grow. But we just have to make sure we're making comparable substitutes and also insulating, planning for what if you have a blight on your peonies, right? What if they don't open? What if they blew open 2 weeks earlier than you thought? And you do have to buy them in. How will you still make money, even if you were planning to use your dahlias, but you need to buy them from another farmer now? So, all of those pieces are what you want to keep in mind. We don't want to price it at the lowest possible profit margin. And then when we need to make a substitute, we don't know what to do. I hope that helps answer that question. Uh,
Yeah, I think that's great, Allison. I'm going to
Sure.
go
I'm
ahead.
just reading what Charlie, I didn't know if it was a question or a comment. It seems like a nice comment. Charlie says, I recently watched your video on EveryStem about creating whimsical bouquets, LuAnn. I previously struggled with this style, but after practicing the techniques you shared, I feel much more confident. That's awesome, Charlie. I
Oh,
have
yeah.
since started creating mock-ups in this style, which has successfully led me to book several brides who love the whimsical look. Thank you for the helpful tutorial. Well done,
Great.
LuAnn and Charlie.
I love it.
LuAnn,
So,
I think I'm going to spotlight you directly.
okay, great.
So I'm going to remove spotlights from me and Allison.
Perfect. And if you guys have questions, we can also answer them at the end as well. But Charlie, that is awesome. So I'm in my house. This is where I typically work. Um, I mostly freelance for other floral designers in the Austin area. If everybody can hear me, give me a thumbs up. I know it's a little echoey, but um, so I do a lot of different design types for other designers. Um, when I work with designers who do more of a modern style, like my friends at Exquisite Petals, I do that. When I work with Grand Lady, they have a garden and they're a farmer florist, so they really do more garden style. But my typical style is kind of this like lush European garden style. And so that's what my flower shop was really well known for when I had it here in Austin. So a couple of things I want to talk about when we get to this third stage. And I didn't want to have you guys here for a long time with the actual design, but I do want to show you some things live. Number one is I've got my extras bucket here on the floor. It is labeled, and these are all the flowers that I purchased that were not planned for the recipes, but are the ones that kind of fill out the wholesale pack quantities. So this is what I have to still work with if I need to fill and fluff these designs. Um, these are originally when I did this work for a client, and I based these recipes off of that. Like I was telling you earlier at that Arlo wedding, we had three different pedestals for the ceremony, and then we moved them over to the cake table for the reception. And so I just thought I would kind of try to recreate that so you guys could kind of see what that would look like here. So we have a one that's a really tall, we have one that's kind of a low, lush, wide, and then we have a smaller one. So if you were to do something like this, and I can share this recipe, I'll probably put it into a blog post later and you guys can use the recipe too. But you could even take these and put them in three different places. One could go on the welcome table, one could go on the on the floor in front of the sweetheart table, and one could go on the cake table. So the thing about this is that you're working with the client to create something that is repurposable for their wedding. So many people feel like when they use the ceremony flowers that they want to repurpose them now. We've kind of trained them to do that. And so doing something that's on some different pedestals or different levels that are in containers are very easy. You only need one person to stay for the flip. Or if you have a great wedding planner who's your friend, they can move those arrangements for you a lot of times because they're easy to transport. If you're doing a big arch or a big broken arch, you need several people to be able to stay and help you move that. So this is a little bit more of a flexible design that you can work with. So today I'm going to show you, I've got off to the side here, I don't know if you can see this table, I think you can. I've got my customization flowers. So the first layer was the mechanics and the base flowers. The second layer were my kind of staple flowers, like the snapdragons, the stock, and I have some status here and Queen Anne's lace. And now the third layer is going to be the customization. So if I'm building this recipe for another client in a different season, I might be using, instead of the kale, I would use hydrangea. I would probably still use the stock and the snapdragons because they're so, versatile. But if not, I might use a different line flower or a rose or something like that. And then for the Queen Anne's lace, there are so many different options with something that's got a little bit of height and dimension. But I can give you a list of some of those so that you guys could think about seasonality and what is available. So when you're thinking about a core flower type, it doesn't have to be a snapdragon. It could be any line flower. It could be a foxglove. It could be something else. Maybe this Queen Anne's lace is actually dahlias. So you can kind of transport those flower types from kind of more of a specific flower in one season to a specific flower in another season. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Um, so we're going to start adding some of the delphinium, and we're also going to add these really beautiful scabiosa. So these flowers, I'm going to call them my dancer flowers, my final top layer of texture and color. They're going to bring these designs together. And so if I were to do this for someone else, I could change these colors, I could change these flower varieties, but I'm building up the layers, and this is the top layer of the design. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some of these. And Allison and Jeri, you guys can add any points if you want as I go, or if anybody has any questions. I'm just going to throw these in here. But when you're building this top layer, you want a lot of depth and dimension. So I'm not going to cut a lot of these stems, really long or really short. I'm going to leave these so that they are coming out because my design style is very loose and gardeny, and I want a lot of depth and I want a lot of dimension. So I'm not going to really cut these down super short and shove them way down in there. I have my base, I have my mid layer, and now this is the top layer. So I want these flowers to kind of really show up. And I'm able to spend my time, instead of thinking about what is my limit on these flowers, do I have enough for the arch that I'm going to also have to be doing in the next 20 minutes? Instead of thinking about that, I'm thinking about flower placement. I'm thinking about do I want to kind of group this and color block this, or do I want to make it more, kind of evenly dispersed? Is this arrangement balanced? Am I giving it the right amount of color proportion? This is what I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking about, do I have 16 stems? Can I use it for this? Somebody's asking me for that. I've already allocated all these flowers because I used recipes to make these designs. So it really does open up the opportunity for you to be more creative in the moment, and you can really protect your hero pieces. Because if you're doing a design that requires a bunch of delphinium and you're promising your client that you need, um, that you're going to give them this arch with all these tall pieces. And we get to the studio, we get to the wedding, and everyone has used all of the tall pieces of delphinium for the reception. We get there and there's nothing left to use for the ceremony. So either what are we going to do? We're going to either pull the flowers from the reception on site where people are watching us and they're going to go, oh, what happened there? Or we're going to have to be trying to come up with something as an alternative because what we're doing isn't really working. So I've actually been in that position where I'm sending photos to someone who's at another wedding, who's in charge, and they're saying, where's all the delphinium for this design? And I'm telling them, well, it was already used in another arrangement. Uh, so I'm just going to go ahead and add a few more flowers here. And if you guys have any questions, just go ahead and ask in the chat.
LuAnn, I would add as I have also freelanced for people, and there have been times when I walk in and as a freelancer, I just want a recipe, set me in a corner and let me bang out the arrangements. And I'll watch. I'll walk in the door, say at 9 o'clock, and I'm not starting on a design until 10 o'clock. And that is because there's no plan. And they just
And
paid
they're
me.
paying you for that
They're
time.
paying me for an hour to sit there, which is like, that's their choice, but that's 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 equivalent to putting flowers in the trash. Like it's just it's short-sightedness. And so that's another way that recipes can help you for people that hire freelancers that don't know your system or whatever. I've also been in places where people will say, oh my goodness, do we have enough to do that? Everybody count the roses. And so
Yes,
everybody stops and counts the roses. And that whole, your point about your mental energy is not at how many blue delphinium are left in the vase. It's which is the prettiest one with the coolest arc to put in which arrangement. And so the
right.
mental load that you have relieved from your brain so that you can truly bring in your creative juices when it's time is like that's gold.
Exactly. And these top layers are the ones that are going to really give you that kind of finishing touch. So whether you're thinking about it as something that's adding the final touch of color or adding, the final element of texture, you can see how much more vibrant these look with this top layer of this beautiful blue. So trying out the different things, there is a time for that, but it's not at someone's wedding, right? When we're hiring freelancers at 35 and $40 an hour, we really need to know what we're asking them to do and why we're asking them to do it. I have people who will have me sweep the floor and have me do work while they're thinking through how to build a recipe. And, I'm happy to do that work. I'll do anything they ask me to do. But frankly, it is quite an expensive uh, sweeping job when I'm doing the sweeping because I'm not a cheap freelancer. So understanding the strategy and really knowing that if you are customizing things every single time, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. I have this base strategy down. I know my base flower is the kale or the hydrangea. I know my greenery is the jasmine or a smilax vine. I know my next layer of flowers is the stock and the snapdragons. And typically I'm going to have a dahlia or a rose or a Queen Anne's lace. And I'm going to add some dimension with that. Status is one of my favorite fillers. And then my top layer can be cosmos or the scabiosa, the delphinium, or anything else that I really like that's more of a dancer type of flower that has a lot of, movement and flexibility. Maybe it's, some other really nice garden style variety. But in, overall, I am not reinventing the wheel every single time. I'm creating this formula, and I have a kind of set of functional recipes that I know I can rely on, whether they're actually written in EveryStem or in your system as base flour, line flour, focal flour, and then you use the swap item feature to swap them out. You can do that. Or if you just kind of have this general formula of snaps, kale, roses, delphinium, either way, it's going to work well, but you're not going to be burning your energy in that panic sprint mindset, trying to figure out, do I have enough? Do I have enough? You can be like Katie and you can say, freelancers, don't worry. I know I have enough. I've got enough. Just do the work, follow the recipes, and we've got it. I've got my recipes right here. I know what each table piece gets. And if I want to adjust a little bit, I can. If I've got a bunch of Queen Anne's lace for my low wide piece, but I didn't need that full bunch, then I could add a few to the tall piece, or I can save a few and I can put them in as a filler with my extras for something else.
LuAnn, I want to jump into, if it's all right. I love the way you're explaining all this. The other reason why, when we're thinking of this as a marathon and not a sprint, because the truth is, I think the sprint is addicting to some people. They like the sprint, right? Especially if
Oh,
you're an ADHD like business owner, that is, you need the sprint. Without that sprint, it's not going to happen, right?
right.
But here's the thing. You, believe it or not, are human and you could get sick. And I'm going to tell you a real life story about a friend of mine who was like dead to the world all of a sudden. I just hit her out of nowhere, just sick. Okay, just sick. And as she is dead to the world sick, she has a wedding. And I have a wedding. So I can't help her, but I have an assistant who I could send to her. The only reason that they were able to help her in any way is because she has recipes, right?
Right.
If something happens to you, and we don't talk about this enough, frankly, right? But if something were to happen to you, you need to be able to hand this folder to whoever. It's, I would love to go to your assistant designer, but mo at least most of us, I'm going to guess, mostly work alone. So you're handing it to a completely untrained spouse or friend who's just
Right.
here to help rally and try to figure this out. And so the least that you can do for them is work with recipes so they could help you, right? Help us help you, right? Like, so that is because I know there is some resistance to recipes for so many reasons. People
Right.
think it stifles their creativity. But like LuAnn's giving you options here, and I don't want you to miss what she's saying, just in case you're multitasking behind your screen there.
Right.
Because what she's saying is, yes, again, this goes to questions that have previously been asked by flower growers, right? Well, what if I don't necessarily have the recipe? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to pick it. You still need to know how many $3 stems versus how many $5 stems you're putting in. You need to know how many line flowers versus your focal flowers versus your filler flowers. I had somebody who signed up for my flower math course a few months ago, and like every few weeks, he's sending me questions, and I like it. Um, by the way, all three of us are here for questions. After this summit is over, if you need us, you can contact us directly. But one of the questions he asked the other day was, how can I create a profitable like bouquet recipe? Now, I'll tell you the truth, this question is not complete enough. I don't really know. Does he mean bouquet or arrangement, right? But what I do know is I can tell you a profitable recipe is two hydrangea, five roses, and some greenery. But if your customers aren't going to buy that, that's not a profitable recipe for you. And so this is where the I like to call it engage brain, right? We engage brain. What is it that we're selling? And how do we make sure we're protecting our profit margin? And whether we are growing it, because let me tell you, I am not a professional flower grower by any sense. Despite my plant and soil science degree, to my chagrin, I do not have massive gardens to cut from. But I've got some great strategic things that I can cut from, right? I grow peonies, I grow lady's mantle, I have phlox, which saves my you know what, like in August, something fierce. I grow hydrangea. I have a lilac bush that I was so disappointed was white when I first moved in, but I really have come to love it. So, depending on the season, I can go out and cut some of that. But I'm charging for it because it is valuable, even if it came from my garden. And that's not how I make my money. So, if you're growing it, make sure you're putting a price on it within your recipe
Yes,
and don't overfill.
absolutely. Yeah. Um, so I know I've kind of added these flowers here. I've got my extras. I could look through and I could fill in whatever I need to fill in. But I just kind of want to go over these last few things, and I have a piece of paper here so I can make sure I'm following my own process. Um, we're going to talk, we're going to just recap this really quick. Mechanics first, then flowers, recipe driven, not a free for all, signature style that attracts the right kind of client. Hero pieces are protected before you start doing recipe centerpieces, smaller pieces. And then at the end, you're building a strategic customization, not a kind of sprint mentality, customizing every single different design. So if you're working in a mindset where you have just a plethora of flowers and you have four freelancers and all the centerpieces look different, we're running out of one kind of flower, we're subbing in another kind of flower. Sometimes a wildflower kind of client might be okay with that, but for most of my clients, they want some kind of, consistency throughout those designs. Um, so just think for a second as we're talking here. This is going back to that workbook. Do you have core flowers that you like to work with? If you do, write the top five. What are your five go-to flowers? What are your core flowers that you know you can get reliably, that you can work with, that you can build base recipe from? We all have them. I know Jeri's are the hydrangea and the roses. Um, they can be flowers that are grown seasonally. You can adjust these based on season. You can have a recipe that says, the best lime flowers that are growing on my farm right now. It could be foxglove, it could be delphinium, or it could be a snapdragon. It could be any of those things. They could go out and harvest based on that generic of a list. It doesn't have to be. I have one member in the UK, and she just puts in her British grown mixed bucket, and she works with it. So it's up to you on how your style works with specific varieties of flowers or generic varieties of flowers. But as Allison said, you need to have a price in there. And the price should really reflect wholesale what you would have to pay for it if you couldn't grow it yourself and you had to buy it and sell it to this client. What are you purchasing it for? That's what you should be putting it in for in your system at the wholesale price so that you know that you're making enough. Um, and then do you have a signature style? This is my signature style. It's a European garden lush style. Some of my designs have a little negative space more than others, but that is the style that I go to make designs on a regular basis. And so I know that if I walked in and showed this to any of my old clients from my flower shop, they'd say, "Oh yeah, LuAnn, that looks like you. I know you made that." Um, and then is customization exhausting you? If you're recreating and reinventing the wheel every single time, a lot of our clients want unique things, but they're coming to you for your expertise. They're coming to you to create something that's going to work well for them within their budget. And so it's up to you to kind of do customization in a way that does not exhaust you but that actually uplifts you and gives you the opportunity, as Mel said, to be creative in the moment and make the work effortless in the week of the wedding instead of taking forever to build a design. So if it's taking you long, long, long times on site to build designs, that's probably a sign that you need less um, kind of unlimited opportunity, less unlimited choice, and you need to create some limitations within your work so that you can then thrive creatively. Um, Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. It is a different kind of take on design. I am very, obviously, very business-minded person, but I also love designing flowers and I love painting and I love drawing and I love sketching. And so I think our artistic sides can really marry with our business sides well. We just need to kind of have these mindset systems and processes and a process for our design so that we can really make that work. Um,
LuAnn, can I be a pain in the butt and ask, is there any way you could bring the design closer to the computer
oh
so we
yeah, I
can
was going to
see
bring
it
the
just
camera a little
slightly
closer.
closer?
Yeah, I'm going to do a
Because it's very
very,
pretty.
very old school job of just bringing this
That's
closer.
exactly what we need.
So here's the low lush design. This could be on the ground. It could be a ground piece. It could be a low pedestal. If you have three plinths, you could put this on the lowest one. And this has 12 kale, and it has 10 snaps and 10 stock. And then I can give you guys the rest of the recipe, and I'm going to put it in a blog post and I'll share it with everyone. Then this is the medium design. And so I'll kind of move these out of the way a little bit. And this one would be great for, you know, just on the cake table by itself next to the cake or on a dessert table. It could be on kind of the mid-height pedestal. And then this one is the tallest. And the thing about this one that I love is that I used the tallest part of a garden stake. I bought a big garden stake at Home Depot and I cut it so that two-thirds of it is in this tall piece, and then the other third is in that little piece. And I'm using it to give that jasmine like a really kind of whimsical, fun moment to draw everyone's eye up. So
That
I
is
love
so
using the
smart.
stake.
That was a really fun thing to do.
You
I
can
love that.
actually water tube flowers, so you can see kind of if I go in here, you guys can kind of see this top of the stake is right here. And so it's just a green stake that I cut down. And I've actually water tubed flowers to a stake like this. I've actually taken the stake and attached it to another design, so I have flowers along the stake. So you don't need a big, heavy piece of chicken wire that's going to be hard to cover. You can just use a little garden stake, a metal one, and you can bend it. Um, so I'll go back over to the other area, but I will share this recipe with everyone. And hopefully this is a good way to think about your design process and to really consider, um, what your signature style is, what your kind of process is, and how much customization is either helping you or hindering you. So I will go off the spotlight and I'll switch over to the other area and then we can move into the next section.
That's great, LuAnn. That's awesome. That gives me a lot to think about actually, because I don't, I want to throw out there, people, you probably have more of a signature style than you really think. I remember the first time somebody told me like, "Oh, I could spot your one of your bouquets anywhere." And I was like, that seems strange. I don't know how that would be." And then I started to get it. So sometimes maybe you don't see your style, but someone who knows you, loves you, follows you, and also who you trust their opinion does see your style and can help you define it if you're not really sure. Um, that was like I didn't think of it at the time, but it was kind of a pivotal moment for me when it was like, oh, I could spot one of your bouquets. And then I started to see it myself. And now it's one of the things I lean into. All right, I just want to address really quickly before we get into our workbook the question that is back again that everyone is very obsessed with. So I think it's important. Visual inspiration. All right, it's come up again. It's come up too many times for us to go, we'll put it off. Here's what I want to say about visual inspiration. LuAnn shared a lovely. Do you mind actually putting back up? Is it a pain for you to just put up that mood board page that you had?
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Everybody is going to have a different approach to this. Um, for example, there are some people who are not going to give you anything unless you book them and give them a deposit. These people are few and far between, but that is a thing that happens. Some people aren't going to sit and jump through hoops and make mood boards for you if you're not committed. So just
Right.
know that that's an option. Here is an example of like a very simple type of a mood board, right? We're seeing a few different types of flowers. We're seeing like a table. We're seeing a portrait, like a painting. And you've got a couple of, swaths of color on the side,
Hmm.
swatches, right? Um, if you don't mind stopping screen sharing, I'll show you how I do mine sometimes. So you can get creative. You can go, people want recommendations, right? You can go to Canva. You can go to, there are people who sell templates. But this is where it becomes a little bit more specific to you and your business and how much work you're willing to do before you're paid. And again, this is who you're with. You are with the not flowery flower people. You're with the business flower people today, right? So here's an example of a mood board that I made for a client. This is just in Pages, Word, Google Doc. I have just screenshot from their Pinterest board and put it in a document. Okay. There is no tech, there is no editing. This took me very little time. I screenshotted the best pictures that accentuate what it is that they want. You want a table that looks like this? I'm going to put the pictures here, and then the price on your quote is going to reflect this picture. You want a mantle that looks like this? Well, then the quote is going to reflect that, right? So I'm not going to put images here that aren't in line with the style and the pricing that we're using. And this is why you want to be careful about where you're spending your energy. There will be some clients where you can't book them without regurgitating their Pinterest board to them. And that's okay, right? There are some people where I'll just say, we're going to use your Pinterest board as a jumping off point. Here are 5 images. Sometimes I'll only put 4 on a page, but it does show a level of effort. And so the reason why I want to address this is because it's a matter of personal preference, a matter of brand preference, but also how your customer needs to shop. So if they really need visual inspiration, you might have to make something like this or like the board that LuAnn made. But for the most part, I really want to encourage people to think about your energy expenditure and what you're willing to do. And we're all in a phase, I don't want to overstate it, but where this new client way of shopping where they have forever. They have forever to let you know if they're going to book you. There is no rush here. That wedding is in 2 months. Guess what? They'll get back to you soon. This is a different world, right? It's a different world than where I grew up in my flower business for the last 24 years. So what we need to do is be adaptable. So this is where I just want to just kind of address it. How you do it is up to you. There is no one right way, but the thing is conserve your energy to make sure you're not giving, because somebody can take, let's just use my example. Somebody could take my mood board to another florist and they're just going to be like, yeah, this is from your Pinterest board. Right? I'm not giving something proprietary away, but I'm showing a level of effort, right? So this is what you need to balance for yourself. There is no one right answer for how to do this.
I
Oh,
agree with that,
and
Alison, and I would just add one thing. I know a lot of florists who in Austin doing these big, long 7 and 8 and 12-page PDF proposals has been a thing for a very long time. And I've seen declining, what I would call kind of like declining returns, right? Or diminishing returns. Your business is it's your choice to decide if you're going to do a 7-page in-depth Canva-based PDF proposal for a client who you have not even really gotten any kind of full idea of even if they're going to book with you. And so I am a fan of doing something, what I call a quick proposal, a quick quote. It's similar to what Allison just showed you. It's one page with a few photos, probably photos from their Pinterest or photos from my collection of work that I have already done. And it might not be the same color as exactly what they want. It might not be the same exact design of exactly what they want, but it represents my work or it represents something that they're looking for. I am not spending 16 hours searching through Pinterest for the perfect image, and I am giving them a one page, kind of like the mood board I showed and the one page thing that Allison showed with the images. And then we're showing, a proposal or a quote on another page that is very straightforward and simple. If a client cannot book you based off of that, they are not ready to book. So giving away, I've seen so many florists in Austin say, I spent 6 hours on this and they just didn't even. It is our choice how much time we spend on a proposal. Do not give away 6 hours of your time creating a proposal for a client that has not seen a simple, quick quote. I highly recommend if you're doing a 12-page Canva proposal without getting any kind of engagement to think about simplifying that process and making it something simpler because it's a trust issue. It's a kind of nurturing the client issue. And all that stuff kind of needs to happen before we're doing this 6 or 7 or 12 page PDF proposal for a client that has not given us any money. So I just want to add that.
Amen. Well said.
Amen. I'm going to add the mindset back into it. Allison, what was your phrase? Putting your brain on? What was the phrase you used?
Engage brain.
Engage brain. Okay, that was the thing. I think sometimes people say I'm supposed to give them a lot of information and prove to them that I can do this work. And that is the form of a 12-page Canva, whatever. And the sprint mentality of that is I'm going to do it the way everybody else does it because apparently that's the way it's supposed to be done and that's how I'm going to get a job. And that's not true. And so I invite everybody who's asking questions about things like that, because it doesn't matter if it's Canva or a fancy, expensive program or the Google Doc or anything else. It matters, are you answering the question for your client? What does your client want? And that requires you to step out of what you want to do. And that requires you to serve the client. Listen, I was a talented floral designer. I did beautiful things, but what separated me from everybody else, I'm just going to say it, at least in my area, was nobody did customer service like me. I literally could read people's minds. I am not a psychic, but what I could do is I could put myself in my client's shoes and say, what do they need? And so that is where most people just need, can she make it pretty? Did she hear me? And what's the price? And can I pay for it? And that did she hear me? That is where you have to engage your brain and listen to what they're really talking about. Do they already love you and ready to book and they just need it to be in their price point? Or are they really worried about what their mother-in-law is going to think because their mother-in-law is the prize-winning garden club president? And so if that's the case, you need to speak to the mother-in-law. It takes something. It takes something more than being a designer. It requires you to really listen, not necessarily to have your system, because you're going to do it a certain way. But again, if that's a play, I did the quick proposal too. But sometimes, and I talked about this yesterday, sometimes if it's a really big job in a play with an amazing planner that you want to work with at your favorite venue, yeah, I would put in another hour or 30 minutes to collect a few more pictures because I really want that job. But most people just want to know, can she do it or can they do it? Is it pretty and how much is it going to cost? And your job is to find that sweet spot quickly. I could pre-qualify people in 5 minutes. And when I tell people that, LuAnn and Allison are going, yeah, because I can too. But if that's where you need to get to, and that requires pre-thought and that requires you stepping into something beyond where you've been before. And that's where the mindset comes in. Okay. Stepping
Love
off the
that. Love
stepping
that.
off the soapbox because I could stay there forever. Should we move into this
Yeah,
workbook?
why don't we do that? I'll screen share. I got
Great.
a question privately in the chat to just share the second page of my quote. All that it is just a list of my core values. It's just a list of like, this is my company's core values. It's not like the quote itself. So you're not missing anything. I'm not hiding anything. You can find those on my website at Floral Art VT. That's my wedding business. And you can see my core values there. It's just something so I'm not sending them a single page with an empty, gives me a little real, I'm not leaving real estate unused, basically.
Well, and sharing
Um,
your values is great with people because, a lot of people are buying, they want to know the person they're buying from and what that person stands for.
yeah, it's interesting. I really do feel this undertow of whatever is happening with clients lately. I would actually say they care less about it than
Really?
they have, yeah, than they have over the last 10 years. Yeah. Or at least if they don't, maybe they don't care less about it. But me putting it in front of them isn't as much of a differentiator as it used to be. Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Maybe more
That
people are, yeah.
it's
Hmm.
not as stand out, maybe because everyone has statements then. Um, and yeah. So all right, we're going to get back into our workbook, and I see another question here about when you send the contract or the proposal. I
Let's,
actually share all of my wedding templates. You can get them on my website at realflowerbusiness.com. You can see all of it. And yes, I send everything up front. Part of being a transparent business is I'm not going to have them accept a quote and then read a contract, right? They get everything up front. There's no, I want to reduce the friction and reduce the number of steps. But if you want to see like exactly
Action.
how I do
That's key.
everything, my wedding templates share everything, my contract, my proposal, my emails, all the things. Um, so yeah, that's available if you want to see how I do it. All right, so back to our workbook here. We are on page 15. What is costing me the most energy in my business right now? This might be an easy question. We might all have a pretty similar answer. Social media, mindset, systems, numbers, what's costing you? But truly, like, take a minute. What is costing you the most energy? Don't worry about being right.
No.
Just what's your gut?
And if you want to share it in the chat, please do so, because I'm sure you're not alone.
Because this is where you can go, Sometimes the thing that's costing us the most energy we can't avoid, and it's just part of our business. But sometimes it's something you can hand off to somebody else or you can fix it, right? So it's good to know what that is, even if it's something that you're just still going to be in charge of, right? Even if it doesn't change anything for you. Next question is, what is costing me the most time? So how much time are you losing doing something in an inefficient way? Where are you redoing work? What's taking longer than you feel like it should? Is it mindset, systems, numbers, design? Maybe your proposal process is taking too long, right? This is where we want to go. How do I streamline this? And by the way, everything in our business is an experiment. I really wish I had like been able to take that into my cells when I started my business, but you're not, right? We have to take ourselves seriously from the beginning. As you get further into your business, right? Uh, Starting into year 25 here, you can start to see things as a little bit more like, I'm going to try this, and if it doesn't work, it's not about me, maybe, right? So this is what I want you to be open to as we're looking at these questions. What's costing you the most time? How can we solve that? Where's the area that you're losing time? And then what's costing you the most money in your business? Where are you losing your profit? Underpricing, overspending, not tracking, maybe even paying somebody to do something that you could actually take back on yourself if you solve this other thing, right? So, where is that happening? I'm going to give you just a minute to truly answer these questions for yourself. And then it's about looking for the pattern. Do you see one thing repeatedly, right? Is it mindset, systems, numbers, design, right? What is it that you could be seeing repeated? And maybe, again, you could have one from this column, one from this column, right? You can have one from every column, but it's good to just, again, identify within ourselves our patterns. Sometimes our patterns are great. They're what keep us accountable. And sometimes they're the thing that's holding us back. And that's what we're looking for. So then from here, you can choose your mile one because we're not trying to solve everything today. What's the one thing you want to focus on? I think LuAnn was saying between now and the end of the month, which is Saturday somehow, right? So do you want to work on your mindset, your systems, your numbers, your design? What is it for you? And then your mile one action plan. So this is where you want to think about how you will actually take action. Um, do you want to take it, Jeri? Do you want me to keep sharing what
Sure.
you take it?
Yeah. So if you think it might be mindset, I've already spoken about this a little bit, but this is the moment. If you're thinking, oh, I've been just a floral designer, and I guess I'm also a business owner, and I need to step into that role. That is the mindset of that might be preventing you from making other decisions in other places. It really is the foundation for what you can do to move forward. So if you're already feeling like you're set with that, then great. But otherwise, this is the part that in some ways I think nobody's going to see the results except for you, because it's not like, oh, I'm going to look at my numbers. I'm going to change a design. I'm going to change the proposal. It's truly, truly inner work, which is sometimes the hardest, but the most necessary. It's like the marathoner deciding to run and train every single day. So it requires a little bit of introspection and allowing the time to think about where those things happen. And that is something that I help people with, and kind of help you kind of not have as much overwhelm around it. But one thing you can do is if you're starting to think like the CEO of your business, to schedule some time. I know that sounds weird, but we're all so busy, right? So where can you schedule some time to put the phone on do not disturb and to just allow yourself to kind of, whether it's a journaling or whether writing the things you really want to change in your business but don't know how to do it yet, things like that, and also noticing where you're avoiding. Again, the marathoner that doesn't feel like running today, that doesn't feel like training, is never going to complete the task. We have to decide every single day. So where are you avoiding? And sometimes just naming it, even if you don't know how to fix it, can make a difference. And certainly you have three people on this call that can help you with that. And then just really understanding where you do approach your business in that sprint road, whether it's, putting something together kind of haphazardly and I'll fix it later and I'll worry about it tomorrow and things like that. Those are all places where if you're recognizing anything I'm saying, that possibly that's the place for you to start.
Absolutely.
I love that. I really love that you this sprint mode versus marathon because it's just so accurate to the way that we run things. And sometimes we are sprinting. You just have to. That order's got to get out right now. But it's not the way we're going to make it in the long run. And I've worked for a lot of sprinters. I probably worked for one marathoner in all of my years of being in floral shops. So, yeah. All right, so if your mile one is going to be systems, thinking about taking action this week, what's one thing that you're constantly redoing that you could template? So this could be your proposal, this could be your pricing, right? It could be the timeline for your event, client inquiry form, contract, anything that you are kind of reinventing every time. I already mentioned this, but I have on my website, realflowerbusiness.com, I share my templates. If you need systems, I share my workflow. If you just want to see how every step that the customer goes through. To me, revisiting the workflow is a game changer because this is where the accountability comes in for yourself and then also recognizing what you're asking the client to do. And is there any way that you could put less burden on the client and make it easier for them to book? What are those things? And for everyone, it'll be different. For some people, it'll be you need to provide less information, and for some, you need to provide more. So, because your customers are all different. And so, we really want to think about what is the thing that we're doing that we can do more easily. I mentioned this yesterday, but I had a client who reached out and they just wanted pricing. Boo, right? But that's really what they wanted. And so I sat down, I put together a quote in about 20 minutes, sent it right out to them. They thought it looked good. We had a consultation yesterday. By the time I'm done, right, it'll be less than a total of probably an hour and 25 minutes that was invested both through, right? That's for me. For somebody else, you might want to do 20 minutes total. Or you might be willing to do the 6 hours, like LuAnn was mentioning, because there are a lot of people. I used to spend 6 hours. I'm not here to lie and pretend like I have this figured out. I would spend days. Should it say this word or that word? Should I say this shade of blue or that shade of blue? It's part of the process. Part of learning how to run your business is having no idea how to write a quote or when to send the contract, right? This is a no judgment zone. We get it. Like we all didn't know how to do this at some point. My original contract was this itty bitty little thing that didn't protect me from anything. So we all start somewhere. But consider what your deadline is to create this new system, to create the new template, to do something that's easier. And if you need help, who will you reach out to? This is such an important piece. Asking people for help. We don't do this enough, myself included, you know? Ask people for help, ask for an opinion. People are here asking questions in the chat. Wonderful. This is the place to do it. LuAnn, you want me to pass it on to you or you want me to just keep rambling on?
No, no, you could pass it on. I would add one thing to that, Allison.
Yeah,
One of the
please.
things that I did best in my business, probably about 2 or so years in, and I do have a blog post about this. It's an older blog post, so it's probably not written as well as some of my newer ones, but I think it still gets the point across. So if anybody wants it, just shoot me an email, LuAnn@EveryStem.com, and I'll send it to you. It's about templatizing some of the wording that I used in my proposals. So rather than trying to recreate, because I think what a lot of us get stuck on when we're talking about creating a system for how we're communicating the design to our client, I used to have four different, like, kind of descriptions. It would be a rounded, hand-tied, compact bouquet, an airy, loose, whimsical bouquet, or a, garden style European hand tied bouquet. Like I had a couple of different standard wordings that I used for my pretty standard designs around the European, design. If they were at the Wildflower Center, I might go more with the airy. If they were at the Driscoll Hotel, I might go more with the rounded hand tied, depending on the client. But my team knew those three or four different types of descriptions that I used were standard. And any designer that worked for me who met with clients used those same descriptions. And we would kind of repeat and rewash, use those over and over again. But each client felt like it was so custom to them. And so, even part of the system is thinking about how do I make this simpler and faster for me to wrap my head around what this person is ordering. So if I standardize rounded hand tied, garden style, and loose and airy, I have three pretty distinct styles. To me, one is pretty tight, one is medium, and one is a little loose. And that way, not only when my team is doing it, but also when they're making the designs, everyone knows what that description should look like based on our style in our shop. So if that's something you're struggling with, spinning your wheels, really trying to just to describe the design, maybe that blog post would be helpful for your system and kind of trying to think through how you're handling that. Because I think a lot of us get stuck on kind of recreating language that doesn't really need to be created because the client has never seen it before. They think it's unique to them. So we'll go on to numbers, and I see some questions popping up in there, so we'll get to that in a second. If your mile one is numbers, I would like you to think about picking one thing that consistently needs to be tracked that you are not tracking. Something that is hurting your profit and you know it deep in your soul. It could be underpricing, could be overfilling, could be not knowing your profit goals or your profit margin and not tracking those things. It could be not including all your costs. If you're pricing things out with flowers, but you're constantly leaving supplies out of the recipe, and if you're not including a design fee or something else. I'd like you to really think about that and write that down. And I would like you to try to start tracking that on every event for the next 30 days with the tracking tool of your choice. My choice is EveryStem. EveryStem makes it easy to track a lot of these things. It does the work for you. You don't have to do the math. It will show you a negative difference. It will show you a low profit margin. It will show you how much the cost of your recipe flowers are and how much the cost of your extra flowers are. So picking one of these things and making a difference over the next 30 days. You don't have to change the way you're designing. You don't have to change the way you're running the rest of your business. Just track this one thing for 30 days and see where you're at and kind of get comfortable with actually looking at the numbers if you're not looking at them. And if you need help tracking, who are you going to reach out to? Who's going to be your accountability person? Let that person know so that they can be aware, because if you're sharing that with someone, you're going to feel a little bit of accountability towards getting this tracking happening and being active about it. And I'd like you to recap your next event. So if you don't know how to do that, Alison's flower math course is great. She kind of shows you how to look at an entire event and look at the profit margin. If you're an EveryStem member, you can see that in your profit summary. It's clearly there for you. And really kind of just start to get in the comfort zone of working with your numbers, tracking a number that you choose, and you'll see that it's not as scary as you feel like it is, because once you start looking at it, that's the way you can make the steps towards progress. And then we can go to the next one, which is the design. If your mile one is design, I'd like you to take this action. Write down what your signature style is in 3 words. Think about and if you do a lot of different kinds of designs, think about the design that you gravitate towards naturally, the design you enjoy the most, the design that your best fit clients come to you for, the design that is kind of like your go-to. What is that? And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. You can kind of work towards developing that. Um, and then think about, what are your core flowers? If you did 7 weddings last year, you did 20 weddings last year, what were the most common flowers that you used? What were the ones that were your go-to flowers? I'd say 5 to 7. Those can be flower types. If you're a farmer florist, it might be more, efficient for you to work in the flower type category. If you're a florist that works with like one wholesaler and they can get, kind of like Alison, she's like, I've got my reliable wholesaler. I know what I can get from them because I've been working with them for years. And then the last thing I would say is, the next time someone requests a style that is not your aesthetic, what will you say? How do you communicate to someone that this is not my signature style? I would recommend you to someone else. And kind of get comfortable with that. Because if we're changing our design style for every client all the time, we are going to have a harder time attracting the clients that we really enjoy working with and doing the work we love. So we're doing this marathon work to really enjoy when we're doing the sprints, which are the weddings. So let's do the ones that we feel compelled as artists to really enjoy doing that work. Um, and not being afraid to say no just because we're not going to make that paycheck, right? Feeling like we can do this, we can really guide them into doing our aesthetic, and also, kind of not being afraid to say no when we need to say no. Um,
That is so true. Rue just said great advice, and I want to second that because it's really true. Like, it's not easy. It can seem almost like a privilege, frankly, to be like, well, this isn't my style, and so I don't do it. I totally understand that, especially if you've come up through traditional floristry kind of training, flower shop training. We make whatever the customer wants. They want something atrocious that they've picked out of the cooler themselves. It's going in the bud vase. You got it. Like, whatever, you picked it. Sounds great. However, there is a new sort of freedom in having your design style. And here's where I want to majorly back up what you're saying as being true, which is I do a lot of one-on-one stuff, right? A lot of one-on-one coaching, and I do a lot of website stuff. We always go into the website and look at what's going on there. And what is it that no matter whether you have what I call the FTD 123 website or you have a custom website, everyone is offering designer's choice now as the first thing they want to sell, right? Designer's choice, designer's choice, designer's choice instead of the FTD 123. And oh, my cat's here. Hi, Yuki. But the tricky thing is if you're going to be trying to sell that, but you don't have a style you're known for, it's easy, right? It's easier to sell it when you lean into a style. And so it doesn't mean that this is like you're wrong if you're, still filling wire surface orders and doing things like that that aren't your style. But this is an invitation, right? You're here for a shift. And so this is an invitation to maybe go, okay, so I'm sprinting with these, whatever. Again, I call them FTD 123 because it's just easy. But instead of doing that, here is what our custom design is. Abby Chick is a great example of somebody who does this really, really well.
It
Blake
is.
Moores
Yeah.
is her business. She runs a flower shop, like a traditional flower shop, foam free or at least mostly foam free. And she has her signature arrangements that she sells. And that's the starting price if you want to work with her. So then when somebody goes designer's choice, it's easier to sell that because you've shown up and said, here's what that looks like. Um, I think this is brilliant. I took a bunch of notes, LuAnn. Thanks for this.
Absolutely. And I would add to that, when I had my retail shop, we would call it Verbena signature style. And often, you have those people who want that tall dozen rows and, these standard kind of designs as a retail shop. And we really had clients that trusted in our more European garden style, where we would do a dozen roses, but we would mix in other seasonal flowers and we would really kind of push them into that. And the reason I learned that is because I spent quite a few years answering the phone saying, "Hey, LuAnn from Verbena Floral Design, how can I help you and how much money do you want to spend?" And that was the worst possible question I could
Yeah.
ever ask.
Yeah.
And so it became, what's the occasion? Where is this arrangement going? And then now let me recommend to you, if it was a state senator who was in downtown Austin staying at the Driscoll and they wanted something very impressive, then, I wasn't going to sell them my, $75 minimum arrangement. And so it gave me the understanding that, when people are calling my flower shop for a beautiful European garden style design, you know, I'm going to kind of recommend to them, oh, it's at Jeffrey's restaurant where you're not going to walk out of there for less than $400 for your meal. I'm going to recommend a $250 floral arrangement for the middle of your table where you have six guests coming in to talk about whatever, your business meeting is. So I think it's really important to think about, I know Allison calls it your money shoes, but I do think that it's understanding that when we're selling a bespoke design, it's unique for the client, the customer service, the idea of them getting something that is handmade with an artist's touch. But behind the scenes, we are customizing it based on our signature style, and we are using formulas that work within our business so that our team and our internal systems work well. And it doesn't have to be chaos. It can actually be an organized process to do that. And
Even
it
if you
don't need
like
everything to
the
be important.
chaos, or even if you tell yourself you like the chaos, this is the thing.
Right.
So this is part of the mindset. We
Right.
sometimes we think we're okay with it, but you'll actually be better without it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
want to add one thing here for people who are like, what do you mean I don't have to give the client what they want? Um, Somebody who walked into an Italian restaurant and asked for a taco, what would that restaurant do? They would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't serve tacos here, but there's an excellent Mexican restaurant down the street." So it's the same thing. It's okay to say, "We don't do that." It makes you stronger because I would be suspect of the Italian restaurant that sold a taco. I would not order the taco there.
And also, we can say no while saying yes. This is one of the things my
Yes. Oh,
best
that's my
worst boss,
favorite.
so my
That's my
best worst
favorite.
boss, right? Can I get a taco? Yes, we have Italian food here, not tacos, right? Like the first word they're hearing is still a yes, even if it's actually a no. So,
Or,
can
yeah.
you make me arrangement for $50 including delivery? Yes, we can make you an arrangement for $50, but the delivery is $17 on top of that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's not just, they're not getting, just because I don't want people to think we're telling you to be like, hard no, go to the Taco Bell. It's like, no, hard no with a yes, right?
And that's customer service.
It's
That's how we
sales,
elevate
right?
ourselves. And it's sales and yes, it's all
I
those things.
picture
But
the like, give them the old razzle dazzle, right? Yeah, we don't have that. Like, yes, we have no bananas, right? Yes,
yep.
we don't have that.
Or we'd be happy to do it and it'll be 50 bazillion dollars. Oh,
Or
you don't
we
want to
don't
spend 50
do,
bazillion dollars? That's okay. Would you like this instead for
that's right.
500?
What we specialize in is Italian food here. Would you like to see what we can do? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where it's again meeting the client where they are, seeing what they need. Maybe they're confused, right? Are you confused? Are you here because you're confused? because we don't
Did
want
you
them to
mean
be
to go to that
confused,
taco stand?
right?
Yeah.
All right, to close this out, the encouragement here is to just have support. I know a lot of us are very self-accountable, and I applaud us all, but it's so nice to lean on somebody, right? As I've mentioned multiple times, the three of us are here to help you anytime. It doesn't have to be this week, but we really do want to encourage you to do some work this week. And Yuki is here not being helpful. He likes to come and start chewing by my computer.
So I would
Um,
just say, if you're willing to, in the chat, now that we've gone through, these mile one page by page design, mindset, systems, numbers, would you put in the chat which one you chose? Just drop it in there. I'd love to see who's going to do what. Who's picking which milestone, just to kind of get an idea and to think about what your, accountability is. I know Allison's going to kind of go through this next page, but really thinking about, holding ourselves accountable and kind of understanding that we want to move this one piece of our business forward in the next 5 to 30 days. This is going to be something that we're actually going to use. We're not going to walk away from this and pretend like we're done and we didn't do anything. Let's actually take this and use it because the three of us have put a lot of effort and care and time into building this for you. And so the fact that you're here spending time with us is very valuable to us. We're learning a lot as you're learning a lot, but we want you to really kind of use this. So let's take a look. I see some people are putting in the chat. We've got
Design
Janet said
systems.
numbers, Allison said design, Allie said mindset, Sally said systems. Sydney said systems. Um, Sydney said she wants to update so she can delegate more to her team. Yes, Sydney, I want you to delegate more too. Um, Systems, working on already, loving the questions and the clarity. Shirley said design. Sharon said systems. And Carissa said reviewing how I close the sale. Does my system need to be updated? Great.
Love
He
that.
said
That's
design.
so specific. That can be done. Like, that's great.
And two more systems and a
okay.
mindset. So I think this is great. Everyone is really thinking through. So now that you've chosen that one, let's kind of go through this next page and Allison could take the lead on this and we'll wrap it up.
You got it. So, reflecting on the work we've done, what's one thing that you've heard in these sessions that you can't stop thinking about? It's
Mm.
probably the thing you just entered in the chat, right? Um, but that's what we want you to think about. Reflect on something that's resonating. What changes if I fully follow through on my mile one? So, if you actually for me, I put design in the chat. So if I actually write down these flowers, if I start to focus in on how I'm describing my design, if I start to look at my recipes and go, can I make this simpler? What will I actually get out of that? Right? What's going to actually happen? And this is why we want you to focus on the mile one instead of the marathon, because nobody, like Jeri said yesterday, nobody just runs the full marathon. You have smaller milestones you're trying to reach until you finally get to that point. And that's what this is about, doing those little pieces at a time. And then always important, again, especially when we're trying to be self-accountable, what is the cost if I don't do this?
Mhm.
Because we have hidden costs that we don't realize, whether it could be, again, we want you to be honest here. This could be monetary cost, but it can also be just mental load. So what it's costing you isn't always monetary, but it almost always is because your time is money. So even if it's just keeping you up at night, right? I wake up in the middle of the night going, oh, did I order flowers for such and such? That's a systems problem that you can address. Okay. So follow through and also think about what does it cost if you don't follow through? And of course, we want you to be encouraged. So just remember that you have got this. We don't run the marathon while sprinting. There's pacing that goes on. And as you've been in business, everyone's in a different stage. we created this for people who've been in business for a little while. So if you're newer, some of this is going to be like, I don't know, right? Like that's okay because this is really meant for people who maybe have some of this under your belt already, right? We've got some baggage we're trying to unload, but it's great if you haven't gotten these bad habits yet to start here too, right? It's just you might not have all the answers. So don't worry if you don't. But this workbook is awesome and you should keep it. And we will have replays available if you missed yesterday, if you wanted to rewatch anything from today. Um, Jeri says she's going to send you an email with the resources. And of course, you can find all of us, all of our websites are at the bottom of the workbook. And I do hope you know who we are by now. But yeah, we're here for you. And the commitment is really to yourself, though, right? We can hope for all the good things for you, but this is where it's for you to just commit to yourself. What is it that you're committing to working on? When are you starting it? And why are you doing it? And then just keep focused on that one thing. Don't get distracted by the other things until you do this one thing. And some of these things you might be able to do in a day. Sometimes something you've been putting off for a year, you could do in 30 minutes. So this is where you have the opportunity. Um, and it's time for you to go run your mile one.
Yes, and I would just add to that, one of my favorite phrases that I've ever heard, and I don't know exactly where I heard it, is that digital ink is never dry.
Mm,
You can change your website. You can change your process. You can change everything about your business at any time. You have new clients coming to you every day, and you can really work through the experiment that is your business whenever you want to. There is no limit. I just redid my features page, my pricing page on EveryStem. And yeah, I had been putting it off for quite a while, as Alison mentioned, and it took me a couple of days to work through it. And is it perfect? No, I still have video coming soon up on the features page. And once we're done with this big virtual summit, I will, put my attention back to making that video. But I think it's important to understand that we feel that perfectionist. I think I've always been that way. I've always wanted things to be so perfect. And if it's, if you're not first, you're last kind of mentality. And I've worked really hard over the last several years, since I sold my flower shop, my retail flower shop, to say to myself, like, good is better than perfect. Let me get this
100%.
out there. Let me start a software that I don't even know if anybody's going to want to use and create a product that is the basic, viable product that I can create and then build on that based on client feedback. Instead of trying to create something, I could still have every stem in beta mode, right? I put it out there. It's not perfect, but people use it and it functions and it helps them make more money. So if you're holding back because you're afraid to make a wrong move or say the wrong thing, don't be afraid of that because you can change it at any time. And we're all constantly learning. Jeri and Alison and I have all been in this business for over 20 years individually. We've got 60 plus years of experience here on the screen and collectively. And, it's really something that I've learned that I really have tried to take to heart is that you can always consistently improve and make changes. So this is the motivation to take that mile one and start making some changes with it and break through that fear of perfectionism and know that you can always improve on it later. Just get it out there. Good is better than perfect.
Start running.
Yeah, because it's never perfect, it's never done. And you know what I thought you were going to say when you said that the ink is never dry? What I was thinking was, because you're so right, like changes should be made constantly, but is if we don't write it down, it's not real. If we don't schedule it, it's not real. That's why this time has been valuable to so many of you, and we're so glad you're here. And this is where you have to schedule it to make it real. So put your stuff in writing from this workbook to make it real. Goes a long way.
Does anybody have any other questions? I did get one question. I think, Allison, you might have kind of brought it up while we were doing the design session from Bo, but I will send him an email with the link to that blog post. Um, but we were talking about just making sure that you're considering your pricing when you're making a contract and building recipes. You can be flexible. In EveryStem, you can swap flowers, you can use generic flower names. When we're talking about building recipes, you don't have to feel so constricted to certain flower varieties. You can put a flower in EveryStem. In fact, our new members that join, there are flowers that are just accent flower, filler flower, focal flower. So don't be afraid to use those in your system and then swap it out later, fill it in later. Just make sure you're putting in a price that kind of a placeholder. I have one member who calls it her MVP flower, and she just puts in a placeholder for something she's going to buy at the market. So don't be afraid to kind of be flexible with your flower varieties. A recipe does not have to be every little specific variety of flower. You can have kind of a placeholder flower or two in your recipe to kind of leave some room for that creativity and shopping on the fly. Oh, Carissa said she calls it her fun flower. See?
Mhm.
Exactly. So just, don't be afraid about kind of having that in there. Um, Let me just scroll up here and see if there were any other questions. Um, and if there's any other little closing points that we want to make. Thank you guys for kind of being with us and spending this time with us. Um, I think we covered most of the questions. If anybody has any others,
Charlotte, there's a couple of specifics to every stem, and I saw them. And if you didn't get it answered, please email LuAnn.
yeah.
But Charlie just asked, you have formulas like your flower library. I think that's more like, do you have recipes and things like
Oh,
that?
okay. I
These
see
are,
this question. I'm looking for a
but
way to
and Charlie, I think you had some
prices.
other questions too. And then yeah,
Yeah,
so there were a
Charlie, I'll
few.
send you an email with some of let me just screenshot this. I'll send you an answer with some of these questions. I have answers for you, so I will get back to you. Um,
And YS, that's definitely a systems thing. After the proposal, when do you finalize the numbers and design? So that's
It so depends. Yeah. This is where it's going to depend on everybody. So for some people, how long have you been in business? If you don't mind answering that in the chat, because it's not always a rough proposal, right? Like
yeah.
sometimes
Oh,
it's a rough proposal.
they're
Yeah.
just starting.
So
Yeah.
sometimes it's a rough proposal because we're just putting out a quote and it will change later. But sometimes they kind of come with a pretty formed Pinterest board and they're getting married in the fall and they want fall flowers and it's kind of pretty formed. The things that will change will be natural, numbers of things. If you've got 8 bridesmaids, there's a good chance there's going to be 7. Okay. That happens less now. But there used to be a lot of dropout bridesmaids. I see Rue laughing. She knows. So, these are things that will change. But again, honestly, my email templates and my contract and all those things will be an answer for you to like really shorten this learning curve because
Yeah.
there are certain things that we're going to say to almost every single customer. And then there are certain very predictable pushback things they're going to ask us where we have to give them an answer. I have those answers for you if you want them. But in terms of when that final proposal, if you have a very together client, they might be ready to finalize 6 months before their wedding. If they are a school teacher, they might not be ready until June. And if they, right, so this is where everybody is different. That's where the systems change. The systems become based on the client. What are their needs? Um, and yeah, in terms of a second consultation and when, these are all things that very much depend on the client, the budget, the size of the wedding. I will always follow up with them. We don't
Mhm.
always have a consultation, but sometimes our biggest meeting is the second meeting.
Yeah,
So these are
absolutely.
things you'll learn in time, and you do have all three of us to reach out to if you need some one-on-one help with these things, because there isn't I'd love if I could just go, yep, you send the quote. Yes, you send a mood
Yeah.
board. Yeah, but that's not how it works.
And it
Right.
also depends on just in terms of kind of creating the system for yourself. Some people love to make a mood board. And if you're that person, make the mood board.
Exactly.
And if you're not the person that likes to make the mood board, how can you ask yourself how you can do it differently and still answer the questions?
Great
And
point.
that's what I did. Yeah, proposals were not my favorite. So how can I make it? How can I give them the information they need with the least amount of time?
And the only thing I would add to that, I think Jeri and Allison both answered that really well. I would say that it's our job as the business owner to establish a process that is clearly
Yes,
communicated with our clients and then
yes,
to customize that, as Allison said, based on the client needs. So for me, when I first started out, I had very persnickety clients. I'm in a wealthy area of Austin, is where my flower shop was. Some of these clients had very high expectations and wanted things very specifically, done in a certain way. And that was fine. But what I would limit is I would say, okay, instead of sending me 65 emails, we are going to have a second consultation. It's going to be somewhere between 3 months, 4 months before the wedding and 1 month before the wedding. We're going to finalize everything. We're going to sit down, collect all your thoughts, collect all your ideas, save all that, and then we will sit down or we will communicate however we choose to communicate, and we will have this meeting and hash it all out. The one thing you want to eliminate is these kind of consistently tiny little million questions
yeah.
and kind of wearing you down. So I would
I
recommend
call that lead the
creating
client.
that, yeah, creating a process and explaining to that client whatever that process is, and Allison's templates can probably help you with that. But I used to say, you know, 4 months before the wedding, we do this. 3 months before the wedding, we do this. 2 months before the wedding, we do this. And that would really give them structure, and I would lead them through that. So I would
Yeah,
not wait for them to reach out to me. At the 4 month point, I did what I said I was going to do. At the 3 month
yeah,
point, I did the next thing. So creating that process, and like Jeri is saying, leading the client is very important. It should never be the client asking you, hey, do I need to pay you a
right.
final payment? That should be something that we have established in our systems that we're then communicating. So if you
Yeah,
don't have those systems in place, I would check with Allison and Jeri and see what they can offer you to kind of help you kind of
yeah.
figure out what that is and then customize based on each client's needs. But don't go outside of your boundaries to do that. Keep those
Yeah.
boundaries and we're not talking to them at midnight through a text. Collect all those ideas and I'll meet with you on the said day and we will go through all of that to finalize your wedding.
I just want to add something there for YS. I know you're just starting out, and a lot of this is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say overwhelming because you want to do it the right way. You want to serve your clients. And at this point in your business, you're just not sure of things yet because you haven't done it enough to know. I totally get it. You're asking great questions, and um, it's all about confidence, which I get you still are not there yet because you haven't, you're at mile one, you're not at mile 15, right? I think a one-on-one call with either Allison or I would be very helpful for you just to kind of get your head in a space. I do offer something called a business review, which is very much looking at where you are and kind of putting all your challenges and strengths and weaknesses in buckets so that you feel less overwhelmed, so that you can attack what or focus on what you need to next in the right order. So yeah, reach out. Happy to talk.
Yeah, all these things are so intertwined. The
Yeah,
way we price, who that appeals to, how we close the sale, how much information they need, right? So you have to take everything that we said with your own filter of how this works for you.
yeah.
Anything that you had a knee-jerk reaction to where you went, oh, that wouldn't work for me. Think of that for a minute and go, wait, or could it? Because that's often where we find like those moments of resistance, the being
And what if it
uncomfortable.
did? Yep.
You go,
And
oh, but
how could I
wait,
make it work for me?
yeah. And it
I'm not
doesn't
good
mean that
at
it will.
numbers. Sure you are.
It just means it's worth taking a moment to go, but wait, and I think this transcends from business to you're interacting on social media to honestly take a minute and go, why am I reacting to this before reacting? What is inside
Just
me?
respond. Don't
Yeah,
react at
don't
all.
respond at all. Don't even do anything. Just notice, right?
Hmm.
That there's a reaction happening. And again, I mean this across business, but also so you're not a jerk to your friends on social media right now. Why
Hmm.
am I reacting to this? This is about me. So I'm going to look at this in me and decide, yeah, maybe I do need to work on my pricing. Maybe I thought I was doing all right, or maybe I am newer than I realized, right? Or maybe I have further to go. But yeah, it's okay to have a reaction, but just be noticing. We don't have to respond, react, or do anything right. Just notice. That could be even like a great thing to just do for the next few days.
I always say business is a personal journey, especially with the type of businesses we have. It's really, I'm sorry to tell you guys this. I mean, I'm sorry, not sorry. It
Yeah,
really
it's
is.
confronting. It
It's
confronts
confronting.
any weakness you have every
Yep.
day that you run your business. You have to
Yes.
deal and overcome it, right?
Yep.
This is why
Yep.
the systems, this is why the mindset, this is why we don't question our pricing, right? So you know what to do from here, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
Awesome.
joining us. I will send an email later today with the replay and some more information. My guess is you'll be hearing from all of us with what we can do for you. And we certainly want you to have thriving, amazing businesses that fit for you in your life and your clients. And that's why we're here, honestly.
Awesome. Your
Oh,
comments
we
are
got a
so
hi.
nice, ladies. Thank you so
Yeah,
much. This was so helpful. This was so great. Thank you. Thank you.
our
Awesome.
pleasure.
Yeah, this was fun. Let's do it again tomorrow. Just kidding.
Oh, we'll do it again, I think, someday. Not tomorrow, though. Not tomorrow. Other things to do. All
Yeah,
right.
work through the rest of those workbooks. Really take it to, take it to heart.
Yep.
Whichever piece you chose, spend a little bit of time, schedule it in your calendar and work through that and really try to kind of put some, pen to paper and don't be
Some
afraid to
miles on
reach
the
out to
road.
us if you need some
Yeah.
help. So thank
Break
you,
in your
everybody.
sneakers, right? Isn't that
Yeah.
something people who run do, break in their sneakers? I wouldn't know.
You're a metaphorical
Yes, exactly.
marathoner.
Bye,
All right. All
everybody.
right. All right.
Thank
Bye,
you so
everybody.
much.
Thank you. Thank you for
Bye.
joining us.